You're excited to see football coming back, Jason. I know you were on the West Coast, got to visit some teams, check out what they were doing. What was that like, man? How much fun did you have?
What do you mean? You were sad about going to training camp, Dev? Come on
Was
now.
I was always the guy when we reported back, the media would ask me and I would say, no, I hate training camp. I'm not going to lie. There's nothing fun about waking up every day early doing this. It's a necessity, but I hated it.
Yeah, they don't have training camp anymore, though, Dev. It's a different world than now, right?
That's true.
It's a different world. Yeah, I was out on the West Coast. I went to see the Chargers and the Rams last week, and then I saw the Washington Commanders this past week, and it's just fun to be there. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers brings a completely different presence to that organization. I think they're really excited about that. They're talking a lot about how all the players were there for the entire offseason. One thing that was very noticeable to me, it didn't surprise me one bit because Harbaugh's an old school guy. I went out to practice and they were practicing football. It was organized. It was fast paced. The drills were clean. The guys were running from drill to drill. They knew what to do. They practiced hard. They practiced well. They finished things. And again, didn't surprise me. There's a lot of veteran coaches on his staff, guys who've been around for a long time. They drafted Joe Alt with the first pick, offensive lineman from Notre Dame with pick number 5. And to me, that's an indicator of what they want their organization to be going forward. They're going to value offense and defensive linemen. They're going to value running the football. They're going to try to take pressure off of Justin Herbert. And the question becomes, do they have the skill around Herbert? No more Mike Williams, no more Keenan Allen. So, as they're trying to become a stronger, more physical team, the question will be, are they skillful enough? They certainly are at quarterback, but there's no question it's a new day and a new feeling with the Chargers. I went to the Rams the next day, and a little bit like Harbaugh, Sean McVay, the energy of the leader pervades the group is something I believe very strongly in, and there's no doubt that his energy pervades the entire coaching staff and the entire team. You feel that. They practice hard. They practice well. They practice with detail. They get a lot of plays. They get on the field. They get off the field. The big question there is, Aaron Donald is no longer a member of the Los Angeles Rams. Yep. And having gone against that guy a lot, he's the most disruptive player we ever had to game plan against. And you always had to have 2 guys on him. You had to have an answer in the run game and in the pass game. And when you're playing around him and coaching when he's on your team, it's an unfair advantage. And now they don't have that. He was the human eraser. And so now, they drafted the 2 kids from Florida State. I think they're excited about them, but it's going to be a younger team on defense without that superstar, that marquee player. So that's going to be a big question. Matthew Stafford's still their quarterback. Cooper Kupp's still their receiver. Puka Nacua is still their receiver. Sean McVay's still calling the plays. I feel good about what they're going to do on offense. The question is, how do you replace 99? And then the last one is going to the Commanders. Had a great visit with Dan Quinn. He, too, a former head coach back, creating a new tone in Washington. I think the big thing for everybody there is the ownership there has changed the entire atmosphere. Daniel Snyder's no longer there. It's a new day there. There's new energy in that building. It's really a funny story. They had an old AstroTurf field on their practice field at Commanders Park. 3 nice grass fields and an AstroTurf field, not a field turf field, an AstroTurf field.
AstroTurf?
Yeah. And they were ripping it up. And I felt like that was symbolic of where they are. Like, okay, enough with how things have been done here forever. Okay, a new day. Let's bring the right kind of people in here. Let's change the energy of this place. Obviously, drafting Jaden Daniels with pick number 2. It's an exciting time for them. But they're a young team. There's a lot of questions about them from a personnel standpoint. But it seems to me they're heading in the right direction.
For one, Jason, I feel like going somewhere and seeing AstroTurf is like going to somebody's house and them having a VCR right on top of the TV. You're like, yo, what are we doing here? No one uses that, man.
Are you kidding me? It's like break out the 8-track cassette players,
I gotta ask you though, going to the Chargers and seeing Harbaugh, like, what is that like? I think a lot of people see him. He's almost like a Bill Belichick type. Like you see him in the interviews, you see different things. And I think everyone wonders like, well, what is it like actually sitting in a meeting and seeing him coach and seeing him kind of go through the details and just be on it all the time? What was that like just being around him and that energy?
I love him. I do. I've known him for a long time from playing days in the 90s and always had a great deal of respect for him. And, if you ask me what's the best hire in the NFL, 7 openings last year, the best hire would have been your old coach, the guy that won 6 Super Bowls, but people chose not to do that. But Jim Harbaugh was the best hire. And I say that simply because he's had success wherever he's been. San Diego, Stanford, 49ers, Michigan. He's won. He's won everywhere. He knows how to put a program together. The feeling that I got from everyone, that what everyone respects about him is he's so genuine. He's so who he is. He's an old school guy, and he's not afraid to kind of say it like it is and tell people exactly what he thinks. It's not the Baton Death March. It's not a miserable place. It's an upbeat, positive place. But they're going to value working hard. He's going to tell guys what he thinks. The coaches certainly respect him. It's a well-organized practice, and it was really fun to visit with him. I know one thing: he's really, really excited about the guy who's under center for him. He loves Justin Herbert. He can't stop talking about him.
That's awesome, man. And you talk about him being genuine. How do you feel like that leads into the culture they're trying to build? You spoke about drafting Joe Alt. Now there's no more Keenan Allen, no more Mike Williams, no more kind of throw the ball every single down, but having a tackle and then having this kind of genuine, hard-nosed head football coach. How does that all marry together to build that culture?
To me, it marries together beautifully, and it's the way it should be done. You have to be on the cutting edge. You have to be innovative in this world and in this league. There's no question about that. So GPS, nutrition, how you train, all that stuff is critical. You don't want to be in the Stone Ages, but you also need to have a little old school in you. And you and I have talked about this before. You won a lot of games in New England practicing hard, conditioning, doing hard things. And you guys felt as a team when it came December and January that this was an advantage for us. I was on a team in Dallas in the 90s that won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, and we felt like we worked harder than everybody. And so when you get to the fourth quarter, you get to the end of the year, you feel like you have an advantage. We're not going to be tired. And we took pride in that. You go to a Kansas City Chiefs practice in this day and age, in 2024, the head coach is kind of a grandfather figure. He looks like Wilford Brimley. He's so nice to everybody. He's an old school football coach. He's innovative. They do a lot of cutting edge things with their scheme. Absolutely. But they run in practice. They practice hard and with detail. Shirts are tucked in, all of that. And I think Jim Harbaugh is going to bring that same thing there. They'll be on the cutting edge. They're going to be doing the things that you need to do systematically in all 3 phases, but they're going to practice hard. And they're going to value running and competing and being physical and building their team that way. And what I like about the alt pick is it's one thing to say as a coach what you believe in. Hey, I believe in this. And then you pick that guy who doesn't represent anything you're talking about. Joe Alt is old school. His old man played in the NFL. He was brought up in an old school way. So they're going to be a tough physical football team, and they're going to back it up with how they're building it, starting with a guy like Alt.
And I love that because I remember getting drafted to the Patriots in 2010. And no, we didn't get a new head coach, but it was this kind of new culture shift. They had an amazing culture before with the guys like Brewski, Ty Law, Willie McGinnis. You had all these different guys, Troy Brown. And then they looked up and all these guys were gone. And now it was this new wave of guys. And exactly what you said. You talk about building a culture. You talk about, in New England, we talk about being a tough, smart, physical football team. And when the guys came in and, I got drafted, a lot of people hated that, but it was like, this guy plays defense and he plays special teams every phase of the game. Rob Gronkowski was a tight end, but he was a blocking tight end and a receiving tight end. So all of these things that were being preached, you now bring these players in who go and they play like that. We're not preaching to them, you got to change your style or you got to play this way. This is who you are. We want you in our building playing that way. And I think that speaks volumes of what the Chargers are trying to do. And I think the thing now is, like you said earlier, how does this all mesh together? How do the skill guys mesh together with Justin Herbert? Because when everything's new, you can have all the right pieces, and we'll hit that later with some of these teams that on paper look great, but you just don't know how it's going to mesh. And I think that's what is awesome when you get a guy like Harbaugh in, and I think they're off to a good start because you said it. They have their guys all there in the offseason. And I get it. As a former player, both of us, sometimes in offseason, you don't want to be back in the city going through football. You want to do your own thing, prepare your body. But when you talk about building a team that hasn't been together and there's new things going in, new terminology, new philosophies, having everybody together, no matter how you work or what you're doing, just being together and going through some of the smaller details that are going to show up in week 12 and 13, I think that gets you off to a great start. And I think even on the other side, looking at the Rams, I was in the building in New England when the greatest of all time, the guy that was our bell cow, was a lifelong New England Patriot, Tom Brady, leaves, and we didn't have the success we wanted that next year. And I think now when I look at him, like Brady leaves, that for a lot of teams, that's a 2-win season. That's a 3-win season. We went out and we won 7 games. It wasn't the season we wanted to have, but it was also a reminder of like, we're replacing a guy who's irreplaceable. There's no one person we can bring in the locker room because even though we got a former MVP in Cam Newton, we lost the guy that people just watch when they came in. When rookies came in, free agents, you came in, you were just like, man, like that's Tom Brady down there. I got to watch and see what he does. I got to try to do it. So I think for the Rams, what they're doing, bringing in new guys, trying to teach them, I think as much as possible, they should ask Aaron Donald, hey, man, if you're not doing anything, how about you and your family come back to LA? We just want you to hang out for 2 or 3 days. Just come be around the guys. Come in the meeting room. I think that helps more than anything. And I know we didn't have that because Brady moved on to go play in Tampa. But I think about sometimes when Willie McGinnis would come back or then Teddy Bruschi would come back. These different guys, then Troy Brown came back a part of the staff. Players being able to pick their mind, players hearing about the routines and what they did, I think that goes a long way. So I'm sure when you met with Les Snead and McVay, I'm sure they were probably telling you like, yeah, man, we told Aaron Donald, we'll love to have you around here as much as possible because I think that helps the players going into that first year without that guy.
Well, it's one of the great dynamics in the NFL, and you referenced it, and you lived it when you were young, and then you represented it when you were older. But the idea that, okay, the coach is saying something, and no one's being disrespectful to the coach. They're listening. They're trying to do what he says. But then when Devin McCourty, year 13, is doing it, you say, okay, let's watch McCourty. We had a ton of guys in Dallas that way. Watch Witten. Watch Zach Martin. You know, and so when Dak Prescott and Zeke Elliott and these guys come in to the league, it's like, oh, okay, that's how you do it. I got it. So we're preaching it, but then they're seeing the guys, the best guys, the Pro Bowl guys, the future Hall of Famer guys doing it, and then they follow. And so the absence, first and foremost, they're going to miss Aaron Donald because he's hard to block, period, right? You can't block the guy, okay? But that other part of it is real. So I'm sitting in the receiver room at the Rams, and they just coach them really well at a high level. It's fun to be in there. And then Cooper Kupp, who's really a humble, quiet guy, but knows football now, knows it inside and out. Comes from his dad played in the NFL, his grandfather played in the NFL. He's been one of the best receivers since he came in, and really knows the details of the game. He gets up in the meeting and says, hey, when we're working on our motions, he goes into some detail. Hey, when you're running that route, push up. And it's interactive between him, the coaches, the younger players. And I just sat back and said, wow, what a great dynamic in a meeting room. It's what, as a coach, is what you always wanted. It's how you wanted to build your team. And so to have those guys on your team, it's invaluable. Aaron Donald not being there, they're going to feel that impact both once the ball is snapped and elsewhere. But they have it in other parts of the team. And
hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.